SeatGeek is the easiest way to find the best deals on tickets to pretty much any live event. Concerts, sports, theater, comedy, whatever you want. Download the SeatGeek app today and enter promo code SEATS to save $20 on your first purchase.
What's up, everyone? This is Aaron Reiss, one of the two Mizzou beat writers at the Kansas City Star. Normally do a Facebook Live for you all every week to kind of run down through things, me and my co-beat partner, Alex Schiffer. But as kind of one of this weird period where basketball and football overlap, we are not in the same place. We're not even in the same state. I was in Arkansas yesterday for the Mizzou football game, and Alex is in Orlando for the Advocare Invitational, where Mizzou is putting together a pretty good showing after the Michael Porter Jr. news that he is going to be out for the whole season after undergoing back surgery in Dallas on Tuesday. So the top prospect will have played just 2 minutes in his Mizzou career, most likely. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to run through all that right now on a phone call while Alex is driving to Tampa and I'm back in Missouri. And you have some time to kill because you're not really going to be covering another game until Sunday night. Mizzou is playing in the Advocare Invitational Championship against West Virginia Sunday evening when this podcast was posted before that. So how do you feel about everything that's happened with Michael Porter Jr.?
It's been crazy. Missouri obviously wasn't saying a lot during this whole thing. And it kind of led to a lot of speculation. I mean, before they officially announced the news, we heard a little bit of everything. We heard back, hip, leg, growth plate. Someone told me they heard he was going to play overseas instead. It was just a whirlwind. So from the news angle, I'm glad it's over just because we have the clarity we need now, can move on with our jobs. But obviously it's devastating for Missouri and its fan base, especially after the last 3 years and all the hype he brought and all the ticket sales. And really just still a lot to process, honestly.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that because you mentioned all the misinformation or different information. Basically, everything except for the overseas thing was in some way kind of right because the surgery he had, people that don't know, microdiscectomy gets rid of a herniated disc that is pressing against like a central nerve along your spine, and that can cause you to feel kind of weakness or pain along your leg and your hip and down your leg. So that's kind of how I think, at least. Obviously, things just get changed through as they pass from person to person, but I think that's in part why kind of it was so confusing and why you were hearing hip and leg then whatever, and like when he's sitting on the bench after that first Iowa State game, he comes out and he has ice on his hip because it's just where he was feeling weak, I guess. But it's unfortunate. Just as someone who enjoys watching basketball, I would have liked to be able to watch him play 35 games or however many it was, and I think that it's impossible, regardless of how good this team is, to not think for the rest of this season. Like what if? But I do think that, Mizzou fans obviously are going to be upset, and I get that. But, this is still a really interesting team. And for a fan base that watched its team win, 8 games last year and 10 games before that and 7 the year before that or whatever, like however low those numbers were. I mean, they should still have a lot to be pretty happy about. I mean, if you told those fans last year that they were going to get Jonte Porter and Jeremiah Tillman and Blake Harris and Cassius Robertson and a coach in Gonzo Martin who, has a pretty good reputation, I think they would be pretty happy. So it's not, and I understand that once you have what you think you want and then you lose it, that changes your perspective. But I mean, come on. I saw people posting after they beat St. John's yesterday in a really good game that, St. John's should have never hung close with Mizzou. Like, Mizzou should have buried them. It's like, come on. Like, St. John's was undefeated going into this game, and Mizzou would have gotten crushed by them a year ago. Like, this is perspective changing just makes people act really stupid.
Yeah, I think, as you said earlier, what stinks the most for the rest of the team especially is that there's a what-if cloud hanging over them the rest of the season. Like, let's just say they go on a miraculous run and make the NCAA tournament without Michael Porter. That's a ridiculous year in itself, if you ask me. That might get Conzo Martin the SEC Coach of the Year if that were to happen.
Right.
Yet fans would say, well, what if they had Michael Porter Jr.? Like, if they made the tournament without him, think of how they could have fought. They could have gone with him. You know, life's full of what-if situations. What if this recruit chose Missouri instead? What if people said in 2013 if Mizzou got Ezekiel Elliott, even though they had Henry Josie and Russell Hansbrough and Marcus Murphy at running back, that he could have been the difference to get them over Auburn? I mean, it was still a great year, knowing that no one expected. You know, you can't. You gotta settle for what you have in front of you.
Take what you can get. Right. And again, I understand. You know, this had 3 number 1 recruits in its history. In football, Tony Van Zandt hurt himself before he even got to campus. DGB gets kicked off the team in football a few years, pretty recently. And then now Michael Porter Jr. plays 2 minutes. So I get, you know, the whole woe is me thing, I understand. But you know, I think if you step back and you think about it, this Michael Porter Jr. had an immense impact on Mizzou, despite the fact he will probably never play at Mizzou again, and he'll have gone down with 2 points in his career. Because without him, they don't get Jeremiah Tillman. Without him, they don't get Blake Harris. Without him, they don't get Jonte Porter. And Jonte Porter looks like, you know, if he stays 2 or 3 years, he could be really, really, really good. Tillman is the same way, and Blake is the same way. And I don't think, you know, and, you know, we'll see what happens. But all those guys seem to be happy. They all seem to like it at Mizzou. And they all have something they can kind of build together. So that gives Conzo Martin still a really good foundation. And, you know, Michael Porter Jr. was always only going to be at Mizzou for 1 year. So Mizzou fans don't get that 1 year, but it's not like they lost out on, like, a whole college career of this kid.
Yeah, you know, to me, the other interesting thing is as of right now, we all expect Michael Porter to declare for the draft and go in June, and I would still bet my life savings that happens. But the little part of me wonders 2 things. If Mizzou is, like, making a push toward being a tournament team and he's healthy in February, March, is there any conversation at all of him coming back and playing some of those last few games, or does he just completely sit the whole thing out? And again, I think there's a 1% chance of that happening, but it might be a conversation that we have in February and March. And on top of that, just, you know, there's Marvin Bagley, there's this kid from Europe whose name I can't pronounce, that are top draft picks, prospects too. And some guys emerge out of nowhere. You know, Buddy Hield wasn't supposed to go as high as he ended up going before his huge year at Oklahoma. I wonder a little bit just if, with the questions about the back, if enough guys emerge to kind of get Michael Porter Jr. slipped, you know, toward the lower top 10 or beyond of the mock draft, does a second year get entertained at all? Again, if I were a betting man, I would say that neither of these things would end up happening. But it could drum up some conversation around February or March, depending upon how the rest of the college basketball season shakes out. And
right. Well, I think 2 things. First, I would say that the odds he would come back, just however their season is going, to me, it would seem very unlikely. Just because if you assess the whole situation right, like the Porter family handled this situation with kind of an immense amount of caution. They viewed it as, you know, it's not even worth trying to rehab. It's not worth sitting out. Like, let's just try to fix this now with the neck surgery. And, you know, I wasn't in the room with the doctors. They obviously got a pretty legit orthopedic surgeon to operate on him. Maybe that is the right call. Maybe it's not, whatever. But, you know, I mean, that seems to be their view of things, that let's take the most cautious we can. So coming back immediately from back surgery and playing and just for 5 college games or however many it wouldn't seem likely. But again, maybe we don't know. We don't know everything he thinks, so maybe we're wrong. But in terms of the draft thing, that is interesting what you mentioned. But I think, you know, and this sometimes gets lost on people. I think people who don't follow the NBA really closely, but, you know, the NBA draft is not like the NFL draft where you're likely to get a few guys who are not going to go in the first round or are going to be stars. Almost always, you know, second round picks, like the back half of the second round of the NBA draft, they don't even make their teams. And if they do, they're mostly just playing in the G League now, like the minor leagues for the NBA. And in terms of the first round, I mean, there's a huge drop off from the third pick to the 10th pick, which is not the case in the NFL. Like, normally in most NBA drafts, like there's maybe 3-4 elite guys in the whole draft, 3-4 guys that you think could be the best player on a championship team if everything breaks right. And even then, like maybe only 1 or 2 of them are like sure all-stars. And Michael Porter Jr. falls in that sort of category. I mean, he's that sort of like, if assuming he's healthy, he's that sort of like sure all-star at some point in his career. Maybe he doesn't end up being Kevin Durant like people assume he is, but he's 6'10", he can shoot, he can rebound, he's fast. I mean, so I think that his draft stock, while it might be somewhat affected, he's still going to fall in that tier of those sort of guys who have the chance to be the best player on a championship NBA team, and that's why you still pick him as high as you would and take the risk rather than take maybe someone who has no injury risk but a much clearer sort of lower ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's decision-making would be different if they had a multi-million-dollar price tag hanging over their head. And, time will tell if back surgery for a kid his age is really serious stuff. Time will tell if it was the right move and if it fixed what it needed to and all that. But, life goes on. Conzo Martin said after the game against Long Beach State that it is what it is and life goes on. And I feel like that was the quickest, easiest way to sum it up. It stinks. It's awful, but Missouri's got to move on without it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that because you've obviously been in Orlando and they have looked pretty good. And Conzo even said after I think one of the games, right, that he thinks that kind of having a finality to this whole sort of saga of is he coming back, is he not coming back, is he traveling with the team, is he not traveling with the team, is he sitting on the bench, is he not sitting on the bench, like having kind of an ultimatum to all of that has helped kind of clear this team's head mentally, and maybe that explains why they played Emporia State so closely. They were just finding out about this news. So what have you seen that has impressed you or gives you some sort of thought that maybe this is a team that could still go to the tournament or could still put up a pretty respectable showing this year?
Yeah, the last 2 games that they've won without, after the verdict, it's been very balanced scoring. They've had 5 players in double figures both games. Jordan Geist has looked awesome. I had one NBA scout tell me yesterday that I was watching just that they thought he was the MVP of both games because when St. John's defense was really getting on Missouri in the second half, he did a good job of calming them down and kind of sorting out traffic. And against Long Beach State, he was just so efficient. I mean, 17 points off the bench. I think it was 7-8 rebounds, 5 assists, something like that. He's been awesome. He's been a great asset for them off the bench. Colin Van Leer's hitting his threes when he gets them, which is a good thing for this team. Jeremiah Tillman had some bad foul trouble yesterday, but Jonte Porter has really, against Long Beach State, he looked fantastic. And yesterday he played hero a bit with that bank 3 to really ensure Missouri's lead over St. John's when they were rallying late. And he's, I think that Missouri's bench, everyone talked about the supporting cast, around Michael Porter, but, Conzo Martin said after the verdict on him that this is what it's going to be without him. Everyone's got to contribute. Everyone's got to throw in. We kind of scrapped some offensive sets where Mike was kind of calling the shots and everything revolved around him. So when this team's hitting threes, I think they can beat just about anybody. But that's the biggest thing is that they're a jump shooting team, and it's a little risky to live and die by the 3. But also, if Jeremiah Tillman can stay out of foul trouble, he can change their offense and they can run things through him. And same thing with Jonte.
Right. Well, I mean, and live and die by the 3 means 2 things, right? Like, there's going to be some games you're going to lose that people are going to, before the game, will look at it on paper and say, you definitely should not lose this game. There's going to be some games you're going to win that you're probably thinking we have an outside chance at winning this. And maybe those games are, like Kentucky, stuff like that. But it's funny. I was thinking about that, and someone mentioned this to me with Jonte, right? Like the biggest sort of thought of why he would maybe stay in high school for another year, which he could have done, was like, oh well, he could play without the shadow of Michael, and that's why he wanted to play that full AAU season that he played this summer. He kind of drum up his stats and prove himself by himself. Well, now he's going to get to do that at the college level earlier than he anticipated. That's gonna be kind of fun to watch. I think it's also kind of fun to watch just like all these Kim Anderson guys are gonna, like Geist, like you mentioned, they're gonna be making big contributions to a team that suddenly really changed. I thought it was really interesting to think about. Cassius Robertson came here for a pretty explicit purpose, right? To play around all his talent on national TV and this drain open threes. And now, I mean, he'll still, have a pretty similar role to that, but it's not necessarily what he envisioned. And I was wondering how he was going to respond, kind of to Mike being out permanently, just because, he had not played well in the Emporia State game and the Utah game, but he seems to have rebounded pretty well in Orlando. What have you seen of Cassius in Orlando?
He looked awesome yesterday. He played hero in my mind. I know Jordan Barnett led with 19 points, but Cassius had 4 threes, all of which came in the second half, and he had like 3 in a short sequence that really gave Missouri the momentum back in the game and really swung it in their favor. And then he had one with like 1:56 up on the clock. That was like the nail in the coffin. Like, you knew when that 3 went in, I really started to finish up my gun, because for those wondering, gun's your instant game story. But he was the hero yesterday. He had a really efficient shooting night. They're going to need that from him consistently. And he finally started to look the part down here where, as you had said, what they recruited him to be, a 3-point sharpshooter. So, again, they can kill you from 3, but when they're not going in, it might be a long night, especially with Tillman in foul trouble. That's, we were both in Utah. Tillman had foul trouble, Jonte played bad, and they couldn't buy a bucket, and they got blown out. And that, I feel like Utah, we saw their worst-case scenario where
they can't hit shots, and they don't have guys down low. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. If you take both of those things away, it's going to be a very long night for them. Yeah,
and that's going to happen some games, almost certainly. But I think you're also going to see a lot of games like the ones you've seen in Florida. So Cassius was the starting point guard for all of like a few games, a game or two, and then they flipped the lineup around, taking Colin Van Leer out of it, put Jordan Geist in it. Now Blake Harris has started in this tournament. Do you get the sense at all? Does this kind of say anything at all about? Does this seem like the starting lineup? Has he found the right rotations, or is it still kind of a process?
I think it's a starting lineup from Tuesday against Miami of Ohio from there on out. I'm not sure about tomorrow night against West Virginia, because I was watching West Virginia yesterday, and their press is just brutal. And I don't know how much Konzo trusts Blake with the ball in his hands for a young player like that against something of West Virginia's caliber. So tomorrow night, I kind of wonder how much Blake plays and if he even starts. But after that, I think for sure he's the guy of the future. He looked great against Long Beach State. He had 9 assists, 11 points. He takes a lot of shots. Physical shots, not basketball shots. He'll drive through the lane a lot, and he winds up on the ground all the time. I was telling some reporters near me yesterday, I always wonder if he's hurt whenever he goes down, because he's not the biggest guy. He's still a freshman. He's still getting his body together in the weight room. And here he is driving through the lane, trying to do all these crazy moves around these post players, and he winds up on the floor 90% of the time. So it's kind of tough for me to get a gauge sometimes as to how banged up he is. But I think he's the guy for sure. I think Jordan Geist, though, Missouri fans were wondering if he was even worth keeping around when Konzo got hired. Geist has been phenomenal.
And Konzo loves him. Konzo, because he's a defensive first guy, and Konzo loves him.
Yeah, he's a pest on defense, as Conzo called him. Conzo said on Thursday he wrecked havoc on defense, and he gives them energy. Jordan said on Thanksgiving after the Long Beach State game, my role on this team is to come off the bench and give energy and be a pain in the ass on defense. And, I don't forgot to curse in the podcast. Well,
it's okay. I think it's fine.
Yeah. But he's been great for this team. He's Conzo's kind of guy. And Terrence Phillips, we've seen his role shrink dramatically on this team. So I think it's Blake and Geis going forward at the point, and some Terrence sprinkled in here and there.
Yeah, and that was interesting because Terrence didn't really play a lot the past few games. Then he came in and was really efficient against St. John's, I think it was, right? I mean, he had 5 assists in, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I'm not thinking of a different game. Yeah, St. John's, yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about football now. I just got back from Arkansas, and a 48-45 win. It was Mizzou's closest win of the season, and what really wasn't close compared. I mean, it wasn't close in terms of the other wins that it was comparing to. I mean, prior to this game, Mizzou's slimmest margin of victory was 28 points, which was the week before at Vanderbilt. So this game was a bit different, and I thought that, there was a lot to not like about the game if you're Mizzou. Defense looked pretty bad. Marcel Frazier was good, but on the defensive line, but the secondary was really, really terrible. To be quite honest, they got blown by on play action passes and on screen passes. Arkansas had a lot of success too, which that falls on the defensive line. So kind of all around was just not a good performance by the defense. Quite a few missed tackles. But I think there's something to be said about the fact that this team has really only played 2 close games all year. They have been decided by 1 score. One was at Kentucky, which is our first game actually covering the team in this job. And they lost that one, and that was 2 weeks before this winning streak began. And then it was kind of a similar position. They had a chance to drive down the field, and I forget if they had a chance to win it or tie it. But do you remember? But either way, I mean, it was a close game, and that came down to the last possession. Was there a chance to control its fate kind of on the last possession? Didn't work out for them. And this time they did. They were tied 45 all. 5 minutes left, drove downfield, blowed the clock down, kicked a field goal, 9 seconds left, and then they won the game. So I think, even if the defense wasn't great, I think that says something about the way this team looks. And that's kind of what all the players have said, was that, this is, Trulock said, we've gone through so much, we've fought through so much, we've seen all these different situations throughout the whole season. We've lost big, we've won big. We've been like viewed as, dead in the water, then we've come back, and it was time for us to just kind of seize control. And I thought that was really an impressive thing for him to say. I thought that despite how bad the loss or the defense played, in a way it showed kind of a mental toughness about Mizzou that really wasn't examined or needed to be there in those other wins.
Yeah, I watched the whole game from my computer. I thought that the only knock was the way the defense played. It's probably not the way you want your defense to look going into a bowl game, but they've had adversity a lot throughout the year, and they kept powering through. And I thought for Tucker McCann to kind of hit the game-winning field goal, even though it was kind of a chip shot, it was pretty fitting because he misses the first one of the season. And then there was an extra point he had missed. And people had said Missouri should go for 2 the rest of the year. He's done. He had a rough freshman year, and now he looks like the player they recruited.
Right, he's been very stable all year, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought for Drew to have put up the numbers he did, he had 2 picks. One was a bad throw. One kind of looks like the corner made a pretty nice play on. And for Drew to put up the numbers he's done this season with a couple of his receivers having a bad case of the drops, Manuel Hall at Vanderbilt and then Jamon yesterday.
And Jonathan Johnson has not caught a pass from
if half
forever.
those are caught,
yeah,
it'd be scary to see what his numbers are after that. So
43 touchdown passes for Locke now, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's kind of crazy just to see how this team has changed course and done a complete 180. And it's Drew kind of knocked the people wondered if Drew had that extra gear going into this year, and he clearly does. And he's running a bit more too. He had that big 35-yard run the other day.
Yeah, the offense is so much better when you can, you have to prepare for that, I think. It just unlocks a whole other element for them.
And we saw bad Missouri offensive lines give guys like Matty and Drew in his earlier years no time to throw. Drew took his hits freshman and sophomore year. Not as much last year because the line was a lot improved, but especially his freshman year. But he, the thing that kept, when I was watching yesterday, just he had so much time to throw on some of those big deep ball plays. And that wasn't the case when he first came here. I think he kind of got a bad rap when he came in because people just had these unrealistic expectations for him. And now that he's had time to develop, he's really looked the part. So
absolutely.
It's been a crazy transformation.
I think that you're right. His greatest asset, even when he was going to high school, right, was his arm. And if you don't have the time to throw, you can't really show that off. He's going to have to make a decision on whether to go to the NFL draft or not. I've written about this, but if he does come back, I know they're losing Jamon, but this offense, man, I think it could be really, really great next year. You'll get Emmanuel Hall back. Maybe Emmanuel Hall develops into more of kind of like an all-around receiver, runs a few more routes other than just running by somebody. You still have Alberto. Maybe you find someone suitable to kind of replace Jamon. Maybe he's not the same level, but you assume that Emmanuel gets better. You assume Albert gets better. You still have Larry Roundtree behind you. You still have DeMarie behind you. You still have most of the offensive line coming back. That's going to be a really, really good offense. And so I think it'd be fun to see what he could kind of look like as a senior. And he was, after that game yesterday, that really was the most excited I had ever seen him. And he even said it was the most excited he ever been after a game. I think there's something he seems to really be kind of relishing about this experience, about winning and kind of and doing so at Mizzou. And I don't know, it seems to me like he just winning 8 games would maybe not just be enough for him, but we'll see. Winning 8 games is still possible, which is crazy. This team started 1-5, and now they're the first SEC team to ever become 6-7-5 from 1-5. Just the 4th Power 5 team to ever do so. And they'll have a chance for a bowl game, which is again wild. The bowl game possibilities. We can kind of run through those real quick. If Auburn win, I don't know when this will be posted, probably after the Iron Bowl, but regardless, now you'll know. If Auburn wins today, that would probably seem more likely that Mizzou would go to the Texas Bowl, because if Auburn won, that would mean that either Auburn or Georgia would probably go to the playoffs, and then that Alabama would still get to go to one of the Access Bowls, which is the playoff bowls that are not playoff bowls those years. And so with the loser of the SEC title game, that would then mean that there are 6 eligible SEC teams remaining for bowls. One of them would go to the Citrus Bowl, which then gets the next pick after the playoff bowls and the Access Bowls. And so that would probably be like Mississippi State maybe. And that would leave 5 more, but it's called a pool of 6 that the SEC has after that. Obviously 5 can't fill 6. So one of those would be left off. And that would mean that maybe Mizzou wouldn't get to go to the Liberty Bowl, which some people have talked about. But if Alabama wins the Iron Bowl, which you would maybe think they would, Alabama's an amazing team, then that would mean that Auburn might go to the Citrus Bowl. Alabama would play in the playoff. Georgia would play in the Access Bowl, and that would leave 6 more bowl teams to fill out the other 6. In which case, it would seem very much likely that Mizzou would play in the Liberty Bowl in Memphis on December 30th, which would be good for Mizzou fans. Quick drive for most people from St. Louis or Columbia or even Kansas City. It's not too far, and if people want to spend their New Year's Eve in Memphis, it'd be kind of a fun way to make the trip. Do you have a bowl game preference?
I don't think the odds are for somewhere warm, so it is what it is. But
well, Houston will be warm.
It would be warm, that's true. I think the Liberty Bowl would be great for storylines. It'd be big against a Big 12 opponent. Barry Odom goes back to Memphis, the city where he'd likely be coaching it, had people never retired. Jonathan Johnson, there's a lot of standout Mizzou players from Memphis, an area they recruit. So there'd be a lot there for us as journalists to cover. I think the Texas Bowl would also have some cool storylines, guys like Jamon going home, Josh Bledsoe. But it's tough to say. You know, I love Music City just because we'd be in Nashville. I love covering stuff in Nashville. But we'll see. You know, we have no idea how this is going to shake out. I know the Tax Slayer Bowl also likes Missouri. And
yeah, they've been in a few of the games, yeah.
Yeah, they've been to a few. So, who knows? But, you know, I guess covering a bowl is better than covering a coaching search. So, I guess we can't really complain.
Yeah, there were no bowl representatives at the Mizzou-Arkansas game, which was kind of weird, but I guess it's day after Thanksgiving, whatever. I mean, Mizzou's going to make a bowl regardless, so it doesn't really matter whether bowl representatives show up to their games anymore. All right, well, any parting thoughts? You're on the way to Tampa. Why aren't you just going to a beach?
Not warm enough here for that. It's actually pretty cold. I regret bringing just my leather jacket and not a sweatshirt. I might have to go to Walmart or something and buy one, yeah.
What's the temperature?
It's like in the high 60s, low 70s. It's been dropping into like the 50s at night, though.
Okay. All right, well, anything else you want to talk about, or we covered it?
You know, I guess just going into tomorrow night's game against West Virginia, Missouri clearly has a size advantage. West Virginia's a relatively small team. They wouldn't have an answer for guys like Tillman or Jonte. But I don't know how much Missouri's going to be able to handle West Virginia's defense. And I think that's the biggest thing going into the game is just, can this team score against that defense? And Missouri has some experienced guys like Barnett, Cassius, and Kevin Puryear, but West Virginia is a very veteran-heavy team, and can that experience match up? And can the young guys play up to that too? So, should be an interesting game. If Missouri wins, holy cow. If they lose, I don't see them losing the rest of the conference schedule. I don't think Illinois is that much of a challenge when Missouri's hitting threes. But if Missouri wins this game, they could be getting AP votes going into the week. I don't know if they'd be ranked, but I think they'd get AP votes for sure. Yeah,
be quite the rebound from the Michael Porter devastation. But thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I hope you're reading the stories we're writing about Mizzou stuff, because we're writing a whole lot of it. You can find it at kansascity.com, or at Kansas City Star. And go ahead and like our Facebook page, Mizzou Zone. It's facebook.com/Mizzou Zone KC Star. And that way you can see it come up in your newsfeed if that's the way you tend to get the stuff you like to read. So anyway, thanks again. I'm Aaron Reiss. He's Alex Schiffer. And hope you enjoyed. Bye.